But I am a university recruiter at Meta, or formerly Facebook. Hopefully that's like still cool with the kids these days. I know we're not quite TikTok, but I still like it. And then just for context too, as far as like why I'm on here. So my previous recruiting experience, in case any of you have any questions. So currently I do focus on technical recruiting. So a lot more of like software engineering, data analytics. But I do have previous experience with finance, operations, sales. So really the full gamut of it. I'm sure if you took a peek at my LinkedIn, there's a company that seems to heavily recruit at your business school. So very familiar with it. But yeah, happy to answer any questions that you guys have. I'm up here in Southeast Portland from, if you all are in Eugene, but I grew up in Indiana, went to Indiana University, got a degree in neuroscience. So I think Shannon said there's a couple of liberal arts students, hopefully, who attended. So thank you. Great job, guys. But did not do a career in that. So happy to answer any questions about that transition as well. But I'll pass it over to Shannon.
Awesome, thank you. So my name is Shannon Gaspard. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Currently, I'm a talent acquisition consultant for Marsh McLennan. I recruit for our Mercer subsidiary. Some of the different areas I've worked in now, obviously, I'm working with more consultants. So we're hiring more data informatics roles, health consulting, as well as career consulting for various companies. Previously in my background, I have about 13 years, I believe now, of experience in recruiting. So I'm a little bit different. I graduated not knowing what I wanted to do because I had a communications degree. Didn't know how that translated, but I know that I began recruiting early on in the university that I was attending. So kind of built my career up through higher education recruitment. And then I was able to get into finance. So I worked previously at JP Morgan, where I was an MBA recruiter. So I worked really closely with a lot of business students, recruiting them into vice president roles. So definitely can talk to you about how to prepare yourself for that next opportunity, but now mostly in the consultant world. So this has been kind of really fun and very interesting. So where I'm from the best city in the whole wide world, and that's Brooklyn, New York. I feel like anytime I say Brooklyn, I need to say Brooklyn, but Brooklyn, New York. So essentially, I'm here now in Dallas. So yes, I am a Texan, unfortunately, but I went to school at Pace University in New York. Have family there, looking to move back there shortly. But I'm really excited to be with you all today. Feel free to reach out with any questions.
Awesome.
And Michelle.
Yeah. So hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Schwartz. I use she, her pronouns. I work for Cambia Health Solutions. We're headquartered in Portland. We're the parent of Regence, which is a Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance provider. But we have a portfolio of about 20 to 25 health and wellness companies. We are a cause-driven, not-for-profit organization, and our cause is to serve as a catalyst to transform healthcare. We want to make it more person-focused and economically sustainable. So in a word, we want it to be simple. So there's a lot of work ahead of us. My role, I am in charge of university relations, and I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. I've been with Cambia a decade now. Prior to joining the organization, I spent my entire career working in higher education, doing undergraduate and graduate recruitment. So Shannon and I learned we have something in common. But my role with the organization, I support our 7 thriving employee resource groups, help to administer our education benefit program, help weave diversity, equity, and inclusion in the fabric of the organization. I manage our relationships with colleges and universities and coordinate our internship program. So I partner with all areas of the business to bring in undergraduate and graduate interns. We hire as many as 65 a year, and about 45% of our interns go on to full-time employment. And I also do some recruitment of entry-level employees. So we hire everywhere in the business: accounting, actuary, communications, marketing, you name it, we do it. So lots of analyst type roles, some artificial intelligence, data science opportunities, lots of software development opportunities. Totally excited to hear your questions, so bring them.
Wonderful. Thank you all for giving everybody an overview. And with that, please do use the Q&A function. So at any point, you don't have to wait till the end. all of our attendees, feel free to pop them in at any point when you have them. I'll make sure to get to them as much as possible, unless you all overload us with a ton of questions, but feel free to pop them in as it sparks. If our panelists are talking about something and you have that question, don't be shy to put it in the Q&A function. Do make sure to do that. And like I said, feel free to use the chat to give folks some love as we're going. But with that, Shannon, I'm going to start with you. My name's Wynn. For our first question, if you want to share just kind of an overview for students here of the general recruiting process, and anything you want to kind of open with regarding that, and if you have a preferred timeline in that recruiting process when students should apply.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to give a lot of tips today because I'm really passionate coming from higher ed, just really wanting to help those. I had to really navigate the process myself, being first generation and not really exposure to any type of schooling at all with my parents. So I navigate this myself. So I'm definitely going to drop some of those nuggets today. But our typical recruitment process, I would say even, and this is just my overall experience from JPM, and then also from Marsh McLennan, typically it's best from September until March. And that's our typical time frame. I recommend students to always apply as soon as possible. The reason being is because we're allocated a certain amount of roles, right? So the business comes together and say, hey, we want to hire 20 students, 20 interns, or we want to hire 50 students that are undergrad, that are graduating with their bachelor's. So essentially what that allows us to do is we have these bulk of these roles in September. And once, if you're applying early and being considered by our business and you're great, we're giving out offers. So essentially by the time December comes around, we're at capacity, we're overextended, we don't have any more seats available. So I strongly recommend for students, as soon as you're even thinking about the company, do enough research about it, but then just submit an application as soon as possible. Reach out to the recruiter to learn more. Another good time to also recruitment time frame in our world is, I like to think of December as another time frame when you can also, let's say it's overwhelming, you just started school, you really don't want to look for another opportunity. December is a good time because, as I said, we're kind of putting the wheels down and we're making sure that we're getting as many candidates as possible in the pipeline and having you apply. So that's happening early on. December is kind of our resting period, right? That's where we're kind of closing things out. And guess what? The business will come back and say, I have 5 more positions that I would love new students to apply to. And that's when we'll post those positions. So I do recommend, if it's too much, then don't worry about it during September. Ideally, if you're one of those students who likes to be on top of it, apply. But if you'd like to wait into December over winter break, feel free to go ahead and apply to any of those available roles. So that's typically the time frame. And once students apply, we do, for Marsh McLennan, review candidates on a rolling basis to make sure they meet minimum qualifications. And then, of course, they do hire review, which is a recorded interview. So it's more of a screening process. And then finally, they'll be invited to final rounds. So that's kind of an overview of overall different companies I worked at in terms of the ideal recruitment time frame. So Michelle, over to you.
Thanks. And Shannon, I think you did have some great tips, but this is where we differ, man. Every organization is so different. So I'm listening to you like, that's not how we do it here at Cambia. We're a smaller organization. We have about 5,000 employees total. So most of our internships will post between about January and May. I work with our teams on an individual basis to identify an opportunity, and I often don't know that we're ready to roll until 24 to 48 hours before I post it for all of you. So there are a couple things you can do. I'm going to pop.
Oh, Michelle, we lost your audio for some reason.
Thanks for telling me, Shannon. So I popped a website into the chat window, and that's where you can go and create a profile on our career site. And when you indicate your areas of interest and upload your resume, it lets us notify you as positions become available that are a match. So rather than you having to check our website every, 3 to 4 weeks to say, did she post that role yet? You can just wait for us to notify you. So that's what I would recommend for internships. As soon as we post positions and you see one that might be a match, please apply. We start reviewing candidates right away. You're welcome to apply for as many internships as you like. Your application will come directly to me. And so it's not uncommon for a candidate to apply for 3, 4 roles, and there's one that's going to be a great match for you, maybe even 2, and then you'll get to pick between the teams. For full-time roles, we don't recommend you apply more than a month before graduation because we're often seeking to fill an opening right away. All right, that's it for me. Yang, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm like, it's like the Goldilocks of things because I'm like, both of these things are real, which I'm sure students are like, well, thanks a lot, guys. Like, what clear-cut answer is that? But I think with what Shannon was saying too, I think she really hit the nail on the head as far as like what the typical university recruiting cycle is for a larger company. And so you can think of it as the cyclical cycle. So like, I still think in college semesters, even as like an adult in my like personal life now. But as far as like that September, that fall time, that really is when it is boots on the ground, or I guess nowadays, Zoom links on the computers, for you to start getting those applications, for you to start getting that screen time with recruiters, with some managers who are helping out with those different types of events. And so that is like what we consider our cream of the crop, our heavy involvement season, where a lot of the resources are poured into. And I want to recognize and also normalize like the nerves around applying during that time, because it is highly competitive and it is very, very difficult, and it's high volume, and you may have some extended waiting times as well. I think that's the biggest thing with the recruiting process, especially in the fall, is if you don't hear back in 2 to 3 weeks, like that is normal. Like, don't freak out, even though I know that you will, because I did the same thing as a student, but it is normal for that to happen. And so I think the best thing that you can do is just to keep that cadence with your recruiter, checking in, asking for any updates, updating them if you have any updates. Maybe you got a new position on a student club and now you're an officer or something like that, and updating your resume. Keeping that line of communication open will be important, because a lot of those roles, like Shannon said, will be open at that time. And then in the fall, not all companies are as active, or sorry, in the spring, not all companies are as active in the spring. And so a lot of those times it is much more of the, okay, we have a couple of headcounts left. That one hiring manager who didn't give me the rec in the fall finally came back around to like say they absolutely want to hire. And those are very slim. And so in the sense of, yes, there'll be less competition, there's also going to be less opportunity as well. And so that is something just to weigh out for yourself. But I say hit it hard in the fall, because if all you get are rejections in the fall, that's okay. Like, those are learning opportunities for you to apply in the spring at that time. But also with what Michelle was saying, when I worked at smaller companies think in actual years, like starting in January. And so if that's the case where you're trying to connect with them in the fall and they don't have opportunities, kind of like what she said, don't give up. Like, keep those connections open, because their recruiting process may not mirror those larger companies that you're seeking after as well. And I will say, like the Cambias of the world, those are awesome opportunities for you to look at too, if you're kind of wanting to get those reps in, because there might not be tens, 20s of thousands of applications that recruiters are sifting through. So yeah, so that's kind of the general process said in 3 different ways for you guys.
Thank you all. And part of this is we want students to hear the difference, that there's not necessarily a one way to do everything, and that, you know, there are those more structured fall recruitment, and then there is an as needed, if you will, and a rolling type of cycle. And so I'm glad that you all get to share that with students. And then Michelle, I actually really appreciate you talking about that. Connect with the company proactively. A lot of companies have what Michelle put in, and Cambia is like, hey, you want to be notified about jobs? Connect with us here. So I do encourage students on the call, like, if you have a company that you're thinking about, do proactively check their careers page and sign up for those, because that can be a great way to hear about roles as well. All right, well, with that, our next question, you kind of all did already talk about some of the unique differences, but Michelle, we'll start with you for this next one first. Is there anything specific or unique about the recruiting process, you know, at your specific company or in healthcare in general right now? And then also, you know, you can think about any other past organizations as well for all of our panelists.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is we're still living in a mostly remote world. So most interviews are are online. For us, most of them will be 1 round or 2 rounds of interviews. Most of them are behavioral unless you're applying for a technology specific role. We're pretty easy, I like to think. But similar to what Yang was saying, I will admit that sometimes it takes us a little bit. And I know that that can be frustrating when you're on the other side and you're like, where did my app even go? Like, is it in cyberspace? Did someone get it? And that's why I always tell folks, like, if you apply for an internship, know that your app is coming directly to me, because we have actual recruiters who read all the applications. We don't use any technology to screen folks out if they aren't using the right vocabulary. But if you have questions, reach out to someone. If you apply for any role at Cambia, you can reach out to me. I have access to all of that. So just know, we're not as speedy as we'd like to be. I think many organizations are still struggling with the speed factor. But we're here, we're working every day, and we know that your time matters, and we're trying to get back to you as quick as we can. Yang, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll hop in here. So very similar to Michelle too. So it is very functional and very role dependent as far as like special things to look out for. And this has rung true in all the different companies that I've worked at, where, for instance, if you're going into a sales focused position, if it's like this true sales, B2B or even B2C sales, which maybe as business students is something that strikes your fancy, but there could be a sales role play. So really preparing and kind of knowing that could be coming down the line, or even with like a technical interview, knowing that there could be a take-home assignment or a whiteboarding session of sorts where you're talking through different problems, or even coding live with another interviewer, and so forth, or even behavioral interviews, which I feel like that will ring true regardless of the role that you apply to, right? Like they want to make sure that you have a lot of those quote unquote soft skills that are just necessary in being able to be, a pretty good teammate, pretty good employee in general. So I think those are probably some of the differences. One thing I do want to call out as far as like internship and full-time interviews, internships compared to full-time interviews are a walk in the park if you're looking at the both of them. And so one of the biggest advices that I can give for you all is, I would say the internship that really matters the most is the internship that you're going into for your last summer before your senior year, because I will bet all the money, all my pennies that I have, that intern interview that can potentially lead to your full-time offer will be 10 times easier than that full-time interview to get that full-time offer when you're a senior. And so something to consider, because I have talked to a lot of students and had a lot of heart-to-heart conversations when they're thinking about pursuing certain things over the summer. And so that is something to consider, because there's typically multiple rounds in a full-time interview, multiple technical interviews if that's the role that you're doing. And it can be pretty exhausting if you're not an extrovert. So word to the wise. And I'll pass it to Shannon too, in the consulting world that she's in.
Of course. So what's unique, something to take away from our process and just my experience with corporate finance or banking versus kind of here in consulting. So yes, both companies I worked for were pretty large, but I would say a great thing is that the networking is so much easier. So yes, you want to make sure that you're applying early, but don't just stop there. You should be networking. You should be attending university recruitment events. The only thing that I've realized that was different, my personal experience, is that in a bigger corporate finance or banking background, it's harder to reach leadership at the top, to speak with them, to have access to them, to really learn about their experiences. Here at Marsh McLennan, everyone's job is recruiting. And that's something that I wasn't familiar with coming in. I'm like, wait, do I have people to help me? Like, this is it? So previously in my world, I was that one person reviewing 8,000 applications, and there was a huge backup. You can only reach out to me for an update, and I was the only person to have that access. Now at Marsh McLennan, we have tons of gatekeepers. Our leadership is more reachable, they're more responsive, and you'll have access right away. A great thing also when you're interviewing with us is that your application is being reviewed by the hiring team, the actual team that you're working for. So sometimes in our world, especially, well, when I worked for a bigger company, I was recruiting and I would have a separate manager that I would never see or interact with. So they don't really get to meet you or know kind of what you're like. We have a separate committee. Well, here at Marsh McLennan, who you're being interviewed by will be your manager. The team that's going to be there interviewing you in your panel is a team that you're going to see on an everyday basis. So it's really a family environment. And I think that's something that sets us apart, being as large as we are, is that we operate on a very local and local effort. So overall, I think that's what separates, in my experience, separates us from other different industries.
And what I'm hearing in all of this is, again, the importance for students to research the company and learn about like the different process that they have, because you all highlighted that there's a little bit of a different process. And so being able to speak on an informational interview to somebody who's like, hey, tell me how this works. Network, like you said, is really important. And then, of course, behavioral interviewing, which everybody so much loves, being sarcastic a little bit. But that is, students here, that is definitely something career services can help you prepare for. And then, of course, employers do a lot of events and great support around that as well. So I encourage you to take advantage of those. So burning questions I know probably many of our students have, and Yang, we're going to start with you on this one, is how can students stand out in the application process?
Yeah, good question. I'm going to take this in the positive because I think we would take the rest of the time if I were to tell you all how to stand out in not a great way, because there are a lot of examples of that too. So one of the biggest things, and actually even before I answer this question directly, one of the things that I want to just let you all know now, because I feel like, I don't know who started this rumor of bots rejecting students' resumes or anything. Like, your resume is reviewed by a very real person. And that has rung true when I've worked at a small company to even working now here at Meta. There is a human on the other end of it. So wanted to give you all of that caveat. But as far as standing out in the application process, like when you're thinking about the actual position that you're hiring for, tailoring your resume, tailoring your portfolio, like I can't tell you the number of times where I was hiring for a product designer or a creative marketing position, and the resume was like in Times New Roman 12 font and completely black and white and quite frankly, kind of drab. And so when I'm thinking of hiring somebody for a position like that, am I going to go with that person, or am I going to go with someone who has like a little bit more creativity, a little bit more edge to really showcase those skill sets in action, right? And then the same thing goes to for a technical position. If you're having like a GitHub, for instance, which a lot of engineers have, or if you do, again, with the creative, have a portfolio or a site that you can show off your work, those things really stand out to me. But then also your very stereotypical student organization, student involvement, all of that stuff too really highlights just what you're doing outside the classroom. Because to be very honest with you, maybe your parents will yell at me for this, it is great if you have a 4.0 GPA, but I would take someone with like a 3.4 GPA and are like pretty heavily involved in student extracurriculars. They're having these experiences that really can showcase and bring to life the skill sets that like we're looking for. So a couple of things there, but I don't know, it might be a little bit different in Shannon and Michelle's world. So I'll pass it to Shannon first.
So this is a really good question. I think so I'm kind of with Yang on this. So I feel like because we sit here and we review so many resumes, after a while, we kind of know what it takes for a can to stand out. And I feel like when we get a platform like this, we're like, okay, this is what you do. Like, please don't be the one of many. You got this. So some of the things that, and this may be different for Michelle's area, and it may definitely be different for Meta, but I would say what would make a candidate stand out more is to focus less time on the cover letter and the resume design, and more time on building your resume. And that's very different. So utilize your career services, because we are looking at your resume, and that's our main focus. Not to say your cover letter doesn't matter, but working in corporate banking and consulting, I don't look at them at all. I'm looking at your resume to see core transferable skills. And I'm also looking for technical abilities and quantitative accomplishments. So that's what I'm looking for. So putting more time and emphasis on your resume helps, because that allows us to see the specific metrics and examples that you have listed there. Other ways that you can also stand out in addition to your resume is networking. So in addition, and I think like we're definitely opening our doors to like, here's what's going on. So I think you all kind of mentioned, we've been talking about, we get tons of applicants. So tons of applicants, and they're all emailing. In addition to your email, they're all these emails are coming through. So 2,000 applicants, we're looking at 5,000 emails, because also they found us on LinkedIn. So I will say is that we're not the only resource. Network as much as possible. And I know within my 2 different worlds that I've been in, that we get also a lot of emails from internal employees for referrals. Hey, I met with this person on LinkedIn, great candidate, we had coffee, think they would be a great fit, here's their resume. And we've noticed you've already applied. So having those endorsements really does go a long way. And I know networking, it's not really as promoted as much, but definitely I strongly encourage you to utilize your LinkedIn. If you have some commonalities, talk about those things and you'll be surprised at how the conversation goes. I would also say be intentional with your job applications. So, and I say this purposefully because I had a candidate that speaking with her, she's awesome, she's great. I told her, hey, apply to a few more jobs. She only applied to like one other position. So after we were done with our conversation, a week later, she applied to 17 jobs. That is not how you stand out. That is not how you stand out. That appears to us and to the business, because sometimes our hiring managers are asking, what other roles have they applied to? Where does their interest truly lie? So if we're telling the hiring manager you've applied to 17 jobs, it doesn't really look like you have a clear idea of what you're looking for. So I would say be intentional, know what you're looking for, the type of roles that meet your long-term goal, not the short-term need that you have. And over to Michelle. Michelle, you might disagree.
No, like I was
Okay.
looking for like, when you were talking, I was like, can I send her a heart? Like,
Yes.
I don't have thumbs up functionality or things like that. But I agree with much of what you said. I think you know, one of the other things I would say, it's sort of a nitpicky thing, but no pictures on resumes, please. But I totally agree with you, Shannon, about being very, and Yang pointed this out, being really thoughtful about the format of your resume. Different industries are going to want to see different things. I agree. I want to see color on a marketing resume. If you're doing comms, I want to see, you know, what have you done with social media? And there are a ton of great resume formats, and certainly your career center has them, but I got mine off Etsy. So, you know, there are tons of resources. So, you know, think about yourself in terms of branding. What is your brand? What makes you stand out? How do you communicate that? And, you know, for us, I mentioned we're a cause-driven organization. And so, you know, for us, people who are passionate about our cause, who have had an experience with healthcare or someone in their family has, and that's informed why you want to come to work for us or why you want to make healthcare more simple for consumers. Find a way to weave that in. And I'm a little different. I do really like a cover letter because I think it's your chance to tell the story of you. And I know we're going to answer some questions later about resumes and cover letters, so I'm not going to spill all the tea right here. But, you know, I think, you know, it's your opportunity to put your best foot forward. And I think a lot of people think about resumes and it's more of a chore. And I love resumes. I love interviews. You know, I get really excited to be on both sides. It's, you know, an opportunity for a conversation. And, oh, Jordan's typing something in the chat. Oh, yeah, I don't like the pictures. You know, to be honest with you, Jordan, a picture gives someone a reason to have some form of bias. They may not, you might be wearing a t-shirt that says U of O and they're a Beaver and they don't like U of O. There's no reason. That's an important space on your resume that you could be using to communicate something much more important about yourself, your experience, and your background. And I agree with Yang. I love to see that you're involved in student groups, or if you have a campus job and you need to work, that's okay too. But how can you leverage that to talk about transferable skills and not just, I put books on the shelves at the library? We're going to talk more about resumes, so I'll be quiet. Shannon A., back to you.
Yeah, I was actually just going to say so much good stuff about resumes, which is our next question came up. Transferable skills, saying, things in your resume that are actions is what I heard coming up. So pivot to that. Let's pivot to that. What you talked about what a student can stand out in the application process, but let's get specific with the candidate's resume. And if you want to throw in cover letter there as well, we do have a attendee who asked, what do you like to see in cover letters? So let's cover those both at the same time. What makes you take a second look at somebody's resume or cover letter? And Michelle, go ahead.
Oh man, you came to me. All right. I'm so excited. This is my favorite question. Shannon, Yang, I'll try to leave some things for you guys to mention. But first and foremost, your resume is a living document. It is, to me, one of the most subjective things you're ever going to write in your life. Whatever I say, Shannon and Yang may disagree with, and that's all right. You got to take all our advice and sit with it and see what resonates with you. So the purpose of a resume is to really communicate to a hiring manager as concisely as you can the size and the scope of the things you've been responsible for. But to me, there's some really great things that you can do that make your resume stand out. So I want, I want you to quantify and qualify as much as you can. Tell me what you did and what was your impact on a project, on a team. Did you see a problem and suggest a solution that saved the organization time or money, or, is it something that you did in a class project? What was your impact? That's what I want to see. And when you communicate using numbers, quantify and qualify, it helps us know, have you worked on a team of 5, 10, 15, 20? Did you train folks? How many? It lets us know what sort of responsibility you're ready to take on. Sorry, I love this question so much. Oh, and when you write your resume, I think Shannon said it earlier, about being specific for the role that you're applying for. I think about, when we put a job posting together, it's not brain surgery. We're telling you what we're looking for. Use it like a checklist. So when I work on my resume and I'm applying for a job, I've got the job description right next to my computer screen while I'm typing it out. So when you're done with your resume, if you have a brother or sister, play a fun game. Say, okay, find these things on my resume. How easy is it for them to find what we're looking for? Each of those bullets, you should have something on your resume that translates to it. So the resume is, to me, a real tactical tool. And a cover letter is the story of you and the organization. And so when I work on a cover letter, I have that position description up, but I also have the company's brochure or their website. I want to tell them, why is the organization a match for me as much as this role? And it's an opportunity for folks, especially if you're transitioning from being a student to looking for a job. Why are you ready for this next adventure? And why are we the right fit for you? Okay, I'm going to be quiet for a little bit. I love this question so much. Yang, you're up.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of those debates that we might need t-shirts for, like team cover letter, team no cover letter, because like Michelle said, our advice and our opinions are just that. So sit with it and pick from what you want, because I come from a world where I'm like, you don't need a cover letter. I don't care for a cover letter. I'm going to be honest with you right now. I have so many resumes that I need to look at that sometimes I just don't have the capacity to. Now, the caveat to that is that sometimes hiring managers love your cover letter. That is totally for them to read if that's something that they want to do. But my biggest advice too, especially on the cover letter piece, and I'll talk about a couple points in your resume too, is if that is the blocker for you to not apply to a job when the job description has not said explicitly, we want to see a cover letter, which you might see in roles related to PR or a very specific written communications type of position where they're going to need to see that type of skill set. Don't have that blocker actually block you. Please just send your resume. Please ignore the optional field that says you can upload a cover letter here because you don't need to do it. Because I've talked to a lot of friends, a lot of students who are like, well, I'm going to get that. I'll get my application in after I get my cover letter together. And I'm like, I don't know how to tell you this lightly. I don't care. Get your resume in because I need to see it today. So that is my advice for you on cover letters. But again, it is very industry dependent. It is very job dependent. So kind of echoing again, Shannon A, what she was saying about making sure you do a little bit of your research, because I promise you in tech, no one's going to read it. Very, very plain and simple. But when I did work at a higher ed a long time ago, that was something that was super important to them, that they really wanted to see your cover letter, that they really wanted you to tell that story about yourself too. So it can be dependent. And then I did mention this a little bit earlier too, as far as like specific resume points and really things to look out for. So as far as like the student involvement, your jobs, your work experiences are really important. One of the biggest downfalls that I see, especially for students who are applying to technical positions, is that you will list out all of these awesome technical tools that you're using, all these languages, all these data analytics, and then it is not in any of the meat of your resume. And so now I'm like, do you know it? Like actually, or did you know it to put it in your skills section? So when you're writing that resume and when you're really focusing on like the meat and the content of it, making sure that you're calling those points out too, because then it makes it easier for me to see, oh, so-and-so like actually use this skill in this actual like position or in this like group project, school project, which can be helpful. And then a no-no for some of you, my caveat to this is if you are a freshman, it may not apply to you as much, but the number of resumes that I have seen from juniors and seniors talking about their high school glory days, please leave that out. Please leave it out. You don't need to put your high school on there. You don't need to put your high school GPA on there. That is in the past, because the insight just for you all, for hiring managers and recruiters, what we want to see is a track record of success. So if you're saying, I was super successful in high school, it's like, great. You're probably going to be super successful in college too. And so I just want to see that more recently. The reason I say the caveat to freshmen is because you might only have a semester or two under you. So that is okay to call a couple of things out. But my biggest advice is by the time you start your sophomore year to kind of have that fall off your resume, since it's not going to be as relevant anymore. That's my couple of things. I'll give it to Shannon to close this out here.
Okay, so I told you about the cover letter, and I'll tell you a trick. And I'll tell you some insider, well, just my realm of why we don't look at cover letters. And I don't know if it's the same thing at Meta in terms of our application system. When you are uploading your cover letter separately and your resume separately, it's two different files. It's easier when we're just pulling resumes. So that is why the cover letter is not retrieved that often, because it's a separate application or a separate file. So if we're dealing with a large overflow of candidates, it's quicker to go in, pull the resumes, and we're looking at that to testify to experience and screen. Here is a trick. I used to tell people this at JP Morgan. If you worked so hard on your cover letter and you spoke with Michelle, and Michelle was like, hey, this is an awesome cover letter, this is a trick that you can do. Your resume and your cover letter should be in one file. Put it into one file in one PDF and attach it under the resume section. So what happens is when we're pulling resumes, we have your cover letter, whether we like it or not. And that's happened to me a couple of times where I will look at a resume and say, hey, this is not matching up with what we're looking for. And they've actually attached their cover letter. So I'm able to review and kind of learn a little bit more, but it helped because it was all in one file. So I just recommend that tip. If you really invested in your cover letter and would like us to read it, just put it all in one PDF file and upload it that way. But I think everyone covered some great things about technical skills, certifications, and Michelle definitely hit it right on the head in terms of keeping the job description open. I'm a big fan of buzzwords, and that's widely known within marketing. Find those various buzzwords that we're promoting within the job description and insert them where relevant within your resume. Because when we're looking at 8,000, 2,000 applications or resumes, we're looking for those buzzwords. We're looking for those quantitative accomplishments. You've worked with how many students? You've impacted this many organizations. So just making sure to also add those in when it relates to your soft and hard skills. Also, I will say we've talked a lot about internships versus full-time employee kind of opportunities. So I will say this. If you are applying for an internship role and you've never worked a day in your life within this realm, within consulting, within tech, within health, it's okay. It is okay that all you have on your resume is the time that you babysat or that you were part of a sorority. That is perfectly fine. feel free to expand on those experiences. Because like Yang, what I've been seeing lately is I'm just going to list out what I've done, no kind of bullet points as to what the responsibilities were, because it's not job related. Experience is experience. Find the marketable skills and transferable skills and tell that story on your resume. We have someone who interviewed with government consulting. She worked at Chipotle and she was able to explain how building a burrito translated into being a consultant. She went from an intern and now she's a principal. She did an amazing job, but I recommend to do that research. And some things that I would say are less likely would make me read it. Not less likely to make you read it, but I would say if it's longer than a page, let's talk about this. So rule of thumb, I have 12 years of experience, so my resume will be longer than some of you who may not have longer than a year worth of experience or 2 years. So I recommend to keep one page. I've been seeing a trend of longer and more lengthier resumes. So just making sure to just make it concise and where it's easier for the recruiter or anyone else to review as well. But I think we've covered all of the various things I would say that I would recommend mentioning. But of course, if you're talking about clubs, which I love seeing that, and that's one of your job duties, and you did a lot of outreach there, please make sure that you're talking about what type of outreach was done, how many students were impacted, what were the results, the solution, and what method, what tools were used. And that's it. Back to you, Shannon A.
Awesome. Wow. Such great tips. I'm so glad
we're so passionate about resumes.
And yes, not 10-point font on one page, like make it readable on one page. Michelle, I love that. I'm gonna pause this from our planned questions and go to Q&A because we have quite a few in Q&A. And Shannon, this is something you actually alluded to already a little bit. So one question is, would you say candidates with current employee references have a better chance of moving forward in the hiring process? And Shannon, I think you said yes, but I'd love to hear everybody's opinion on that.
So I will just be very clear. Legally, we maintain legal integrity within our processes. So we want to let's just put that out there. So our jobs as recruiters, not only to speak with you all, get you interested in the roles, but we're also liaisons with our business. So we get referrals all the time, we'll refer them, but our job is to be impartial. We want to make sure that just because they're a referral, they're not going to be advanced quickly in the process compared to Kelton that's here today. So Kelton applied 2 months ago, and we have a referral that just applied. That referral is now in final interviews. We're not allowed to do that. Our legal teams will not allow us to do that, I would say for all of our organizations, because we need to maintain legal integrity within our process. It helps because it does help for the referral because someone has met with you. That's what helps, is because you're no longer just a paper. You're no longer just a recorded interview where maybe you were nervous. Someone was able to speak to their interaction with you and was able to kind of vouch for you to say whether or not you'd be a great fit. So I would say we treat, whether you're a referral or an everyday kind of Joe Smith applicant, you're all on the same playing field. However, you have more people that kind of can vouch for you in terms of your performance or your background, which always helps. And you never know, if we don't have a position available, that person may hook you up with someone else who's hiring for another role. So it's always good to know people and get your name out there within any organization.
So I'm legally speaking, I would have to follow the same things. But one thing, me being here today is just caveats on caveats. But so in companies before, very similar to Shannon's, there was very much like a process, because there cannot be any bias in the process in any fashion. However, what I will say is at way larger companies like at Meta, or at a company I used to work at called Gartner, with the volume of applications, they actually have dedicated referral recruiting teams. And so at a company of that magnitude and size, sometimes a referral can actually be beneficial just because you actually go through a different recruiting process. But again, that caveat is typically at like very large companies that have very much so like decentralized recruiting processes, a lot of different requisitions that they're hiring for, different hiring managers that they're hiring for. But that is definitely something that could be advantageous as far as like, depending on the position that you're wanting to be in, because as much as I love my job, I am also metriced and I love making money. And in order to do that, I have to be really good at my job. And so there are SLAs that I also have to follow if it's a referral or if it's a candidate that came through a different pipeline like that too. And so not to say that there will be bias or anything, because there won't be, but there is a different just like service level agreement as far as like how you're going through the process, making sure that you're getting that follow up as well, whether it is like a you're moving on or like a sorry, your qualifications don't meet. So that is my one caveat there. But again, no bias. We're not going to give you special treatment because you know so and so as like a C suite, but it is like, okay, well, I have these actual like company policies and rules and stuff I need to follow. So that is at least my experience at Meta. So
Michelle, it's all you now.
Yeah, for us, sure it can help, but you still have to meet the qualifications of the job and compete with other candidates. So you will never get hired because you know anybody. So it doesn't hurt, is my answer.
Yeah, perfect, easy. And what I'm hearing too is like it helps you at least learn about the company, right? So knowing somebody is just great because it'll help you have a better application. You might know something about that. So really looking at it from the point of research, getting information, understanding the organization in a different way, and not necessarily as a part of the recruiting process. Love that. I don't know that we're going to get through all the questions, but I'm going to start going. So the next question, what type of follow-up is most appreciated from candidates after sending in an application? And we will start with Yang. We'll start with you.
Kind, understanding one. I do appreciate it if candidates follow up, like if they decide to send me a LinkedIn connection because they're like, hey, I applied, or hey, I saw you at this U of O career lab session. That is definitely appreciated. But oftentimes, if I'm going to be very, very frank with you, I get inundated with in-mails all day from students to the point where like I don't even read my LinkedIn messages anymore. And so sometimes the follow-up has to be strategic, but if you do follow up and for some reason you don't hear back from a recruiter right away, doesn't mean that your application is lost in a void. But when I do reach out to a candidate and if they reply, like I appreciate it, there's just mutual respect. I think that's always a good thing. So.
Shannon,
I would say it matters on, I do like follow-ups, but I do have a caveat to that. It's how much follow-up that happens. I have some candidates getting your eye twitched.
Like self-awareness is really what
self-aware. Yes, I love that. Self-awareness in terms of how much. And I think that's very much what you were saying with like, be strategic with your follow-up, because we've talked about, I think you're seeing the theme is that we've had a lot of individuals that do reach out to us. I do hold like Mercer kind of meetups. So you can meet with me throughout the season and really speak with me further about any opportunities. However, we talked about our season, and certain seasons we're just certain parts of our season or cycle, we're just very busy. September is always a great time. Some parts of summer is good. But if you're trying to reach out to us, and I hate to say for my season, from what I've seen, October, November, we're doing interview days, and that can be very overwhelming. So I would say if we don't respond, feel free to reach out, but just be mindful that a response may take longer than I try to be responsive within 48 hours, but it may take up to a week or 2 weeks for a response, because we're also, in our world, I'm your main contact. So I'm the person that's working with you, advising the business. I'm walking you from start to finish, and I may also be extending your offer, but I'm also running interview days. So because our role is not just working with you on your specific application, I think it's helpful for you to know what's going on in our world too. And we're just kind of, we're just doing everything. We're multitasking. So I would recommend just reach out with an email. If we do have coffee chats or you're inquiring about that, sign up as soon as possible, but also attend events. They're really important. And we work really hard at putting on those events because we plan them around our schedules. And that's when we're available and we're ready to answer as much questions as possible. So I recommend to utilize a lot of those opportunities to really get some face-to-face time with us, even if it's after the event or during the event, during the Q&A portion.
And I would just say, from my perspective, you don't have to follow up on an application, but maybe follow up on after the interview. Send No more handwritten notes. No one lives in a specific spot anymore. And if it's an interview committee, they may all be in different locations, but a nice short email, maybe referencing part of your conversation, is a better use of your time and energy than reaching out to the recruiter to say, hey, I submitted that app.
And I will say something else to add to that. Like I've seen on the flip side, it also matters on who's decision maker, I would say, because sometimes it makes sense for you to do that in terms of being intentional with your communication. So at JPM, we made the recruiters made the hiring decisions in MBA. So I would have individuals that would reach out right away. And why I'm saying this is because after the interview, let's say you may have been declined after you submit an application. I've had candidates that one, he reached out to me with a beautiful email. It was really well written. I felt like it was his cover letter. And he explained that even though he wasn't considered, here's the reason why he thinks that he should be, but he really understood my role in the process and was able to know that I was that decision maker, and I was able to include him in interviews and he received an offer. So during that process, it makes sense, but I just recommend just double checking who is your gatekeeper, who's responsible for what, to know whether or not an email is really necessary. Or would you rather just go on LinkedIn and reach out to a business member, a part of that team, to really learn more about the day-to-day responsibilities versus us? I can't tell you what our consultants do on a day-to-day basis. I know they're awesome, but that's pretty much as far as it goes.
Wonderful. And I think this will be our last question because it works perfectly for this event. Somebody asked, after a webinar like this, or let's say a recruiting event or anything, what type of follow-up do you appreciate from potential candidates?
Is it me? Who's that?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yang, you already popped in your LinkedIn.
Yeah. Hey, I'm happy, especially for an event like this small with 11 people. Like, I am more than happy to extend myself, especially for people who I've already met, who I have a connection to. Like, if you're saying like, hey, thanks for chatting at this event, I'll accept your invite. Like, I'll be there if you have questions. It goes back to my SLA for my personal message responses may not be as quick as my work inbox. But like happy to always have a LinkedIn connection too. I think that's always like a nice casual way to follow up with somebody and make that connection just like immediately.
Totally agree.
And always attach your resume, please, because my next response will be, because I use the emails are typically like, hey, love this company. I think I'd be a great fit. What positions do you have available? Well, for us to see what positions you qualify for or that you may be eligible for, we need to look at your resume to do a quick glance to see, do you meet the minimum qualification? So always when you do send out an email, which I think is great to do after this, go ahead and do that, but just attach your resume. And if I don't have any roles available, I'm very big on connecting you with any of my other our national team to see what other opportunities may be available within university recruitment. So one way or another, we want you to be a part of Mercer, and we're just doing a lot of work on the back end to connect you with the right person. If you don't receive a response, just know we're at work. We're getting it done for you.
Wonderful. So I'm hearing reach out, connect on LinkedIn, let them know how did they connect with you. They were at this event, have it personalized, and then, attach your resume, because that can't hurt, be an opportunity. Well, I just want to give you all a big thank you. We're at time. That went so fast. I did not even expect it. Students, please put big thank yous in chats for all of our panelists.